G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Welcome to this live session. Are you happy with how you draw? Are you confident when you draw? Do you find yourself looking at sheets of paper with a pen or a pencil, whatever you use, in your hand with your reference there or something in front of you you want to draw, and you just don't know where to start? You still have this, I don't feel that I really know what I'm doing, almost like creating a drawing, particularly at the start, is all these hesitant, random steps. I have a question already. Do you do one-on-one mentoring? I do give lessons. They are paid, I'm afraid. You pay, I charge. So if you want to send me an email, or DM me on my Instagram account, that's probably the best way to get the details of that moment. So when I sit down to draw, do I know what to do, or do I feel, I just never know where to start? And often we think when we have problems with drawing, when we're hesitant to know how to start or how to progress a drawing, that the problem is I don't have enough technical skills. I don't have enough understanding of techniques to use, of ways of putting the ink or the pencil, whatever it is I use, onto the paper. And so we go off and we try and, so I've got something in my eye. It's very annoying. So we go off and we try and find some more techniques we can practice. We draw up more little boxes and put hatches, and we draw straight lines more and more. We maybe draw boxes in different stages of perspective, and we do all these things that seem to be equipping skills for drawing. But when we go to draw again, we look at our reference and we're still not sure where to start, or we think we know what to do, and so we start to do it, but we find it never gives us the results we're after. And I suppose the results we're after, I'm presuming, if you're watching me and my channel, that the results that we're after are ones that are fairly realistic, capture a strong sense of realism, possibly in an observably stylistic way, but still there's a strong sense of realism in what we do. So so what do we do? How do we overcome that? What is it that we have to learn, that we know where to start, that we're confident in our starting, and that we progress our drawing so that by the time we get to the end, we have something that looks as we hoped it would. And we're not frustrated, particularly if we draw freehand in ink, because, and by that, I mean, we don't use any pencil at all. And that can be a challenge, obviously, because we can't erase anything. So every mark, every line, every shape, every object we put on the paper, we can't get rid of once it's there. G'day, German. We can't get rid of once it's there. So my understanding that I think I've developed over the last maybe 3 years of pretty intense drawing for YouTube. So thank you everyone for helping to give me the motivation to do this. I realized that it's actually not skills that we learn that enable us to draw. It's having a way of, I mean, they're connected at some point, but that point is, if you like, further downstream in the drawing process. That the real challenge and the real therefore area of breakthrough is how we think, is what happens in our mind, even before things such as observation, because what I observe and how I observe comes from what I'm already thinking I need to know when I draw, the information I need to have before I draw. G'day there, Jesse. From Southern California. It's a very, very nippy autumn morning. It's just after 7:30 in the morning here where I am. I hope it's a bit warmer where you are. We've just changed our weather. It can happen very, very abruptly in summer, from really quite balmy, pleasant and not too hot autumn days to suddenly it seems to get dark really quickly, and there's a lot of heavy dew in the morning, and there's a real nip in the air that can take a while to leave. So I'm still adjusting, but it's our thinking that progresses. Well, it doesn't progress, it actually starts, and it then directs what we do. So and you may have heard parts of this in other talks, other some videos I've done. But I think that the most fundamental weakness in our thinking when we come to a reference that affects everything we do is that we think we're copying when we draw. That the drawing process is one of seeing something and then copying it. Now, for lots of things we draw, that can seem to be a fairly obvious approach. When we think about it, so many of these things go back to our childhood experiences where copying is, well, as kids, often how we learn. And so the whole idea that learning is copying is, in a general sense, a pretty fundamental one within us. And so, as kids, we often copy things where copying, and by copying, I mean doing a line for line exactness, if we can, works well. Most of us as kids, and certainly for me, we start by drawing cartoons or stories from kids' books that we have, and so they are often very simplified, and they're often a continuous line type drawing. So basically, when we look at a kid's book or cartoons, we see, and I'm not talking about the sort of the really graphic sort of art comics that, as I think of them, you might just think of them as comics, but compared to the comics I had as a kid, the really kind of high end, really impacting, really very dramatic sort of manga, sort of anime stuff. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about more your kiddies comics for little kids. G'day, Stevie. Um, so, so where's the danger when I look at to see the chat? G'day, Dave. Is I lose my train of thought. Uh, Comics and looking at what's there. Um, and that art form does lend itself to, if you like, one for one repeating, one for one repetition. I see this line in this shape that creates this shape, and so I create a line that creates this shape, and there are some smaller lines that create smaller shapes inside, and so I copy those, and so forth. And if I'm accurate, I can get an exactness, which is very pleasing as a kid, thinking, wow, this really looks like Scrooge McDuck or whoever it is we wanted to draw from the cartoon that we copied. And then when we start to do our own drawings, we're often repeating that process, even if it's from our imagination, as it often then goes on to be. And we're not copying a cartoon as such. We're still drawing a cartoon-like form, because in our mind now, drawing is outline well, it's outline to create a shape that looks like an object viewed from a certain direction. And that's because it is. I mean, it partly is. We can see it that way. Um, and then as we perhaps get older, or maybe there's a big gap and we don't do any drawing at all for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, at some stage we come back to it. And that in our mind is still what we fundamentally understand the drawing process as being. Drawing lines, drawing outlines that draw shapes that represent objects in outline form, at least. And that, but because we're adults now, we think, well, we're obviously going to do this to a more till we reach a more comfortable, not more comfortable, a more sort of adult looking um, result, so that it looks great, so that it looks real. And so we sort of start with the outline, and then we add things to it to make it look more real. So we add, and the word I probably most often hear is texture. We add textures to it in some way, and really the skills, the techniques we need to pick up in learning to draw as an adult is learning the things that we can add to a basic outline starting point. And I think what I've come to understand is that this isn't the most helpful way to draw if we're after some sense of realism in our drawing, and we draw directly with ink, so we can't erase anything we put on the paper, because once that outline's there, it's there. It'll be there at the end. And it's often, even if we draw it fairly as lightly or as lightly as we can, it still ends up being a very sort of visually impacting and distinctive series of marks that we've put on the paper. So uh, no, I didn't consciously think, oh, well, my thinking is wrong, or at least my thinking is unhelpful. I mean, there is no right or wrong in drawing. Let me make very clear. I often use words or conceptualize somewhat in that way simply because it's easier and quicker. Otherwise, we're qualifying every single thing we say as sort of like, well, in absolutely most cases or almost all cases, and so you get what I mean. There is no right or wrong. In the end, the best way for me to draw is the way that produces the drawings that give me delight when I see them at the end, or that are useful for a particular purpose that I have. So let's just see that as the big kind of understood in everything we say. So assuming that we're wanting to do drawings that create a sense of realism, for me, I began to look at my drawings and kind of, because I haven't sort of done an art course that gave me a framework, gave me a method that set me up with, if you like, masters who were already achieving what I wanted to achieve. And I kind of looked at their stuff and tried to sort of retrofit it into my drawings. It was more looking at what I was doing and thinking, yeah, look, this is a bit better than what it was, but it's still got lots of problems. It's still looking pretty cartoonish in an adult sort of way. Um, um, I found that I was getting what I was doing. I was doing better, because if we practice anything with intent and purpose, and with critiquing what we do, and being prepared to evaluate and change what we do, we should almost certainly improve in what we're doing. And so what I was doing did improve to a certain point, except it still wasn't looking realistic. It was just looking more accurate. And so I had drawings that were the subjects I love, the architecture, street scene type subjects in most cases, where I was drawing continuous lines, down the side of each column and across the top, and even for sculptures and decorative elements, that I began to take more risk in drawing subjects that had them for the first place. So all of that, please, if you think this is interesting, hit the like button for me while I think of saying it, and you might think to do it. Um, and they were becoming improved, but in a sense, they were also becoming more locked into something I didn't feel had the sense of, this has a feeling that it's real. It was more like it was, I don't know, a photo that had then been put through some sort of program to kind of super simplify it and give it a heavy outline. That at best was how it was looking. Um, and I think for me, and I think the fact that I was drawing so much architecture helped entrench me in an unhelpful way of thinking for the result I was after, because architecture really does lend itself to outline. Um, Thank you, Tracy. That's very kind of you to say. Um, I was so architecture is, you can do like the outside box of the building, and even if it's from an angle, you've got to, what are they called? Trapezoid? I don't know. Anyway, two four-sided figures um, to outline, and you've got windows and doors and lots of things where a line contour. Yeah, that's a good word. You've got lots of lines. That are straight, or at least smooth. Think of the silhouette edge of a dome. So it lent itself to that. But my problem was, I also really, really wanted to draw trees. And because I'd actually painted for 10 years before I drew, and and I love drawing trees. Now, drawing paint is so. This is wattle. Um, but my trees look much like this, only they're green. Um, um, so I'd spent 10 years really going deep in painting tree canopies and trees, and so I really wanted to draw them too. But somehow, drawing with this and drawing with a brush were very different experiences. So that was always the problem, trying to draw trees that I felt were as good as the architecture or matched the architecture to look at, so they felt like they are in the same, um, thanks, watercolor, love and dog. Um, yeah, and so at some point, I began to realize that what I was doing with trees, because I did begin to draw with pencil first, but I didn't. I used pencil like a pen, which I think was helpful for me eventually when I switched to pen, because I wasn't doing trees by kind of, if you like, shading, smudging the graphite. I was using pencils to create lines. So that transferred to this, and I did develop. I realized what I was doing was because most trees I was drawing were small, because they were next to the architecture, which was larger. They were usually from some distance. And so I realized, well, if you just see the leaves as like one continuous kind of form that goes in and out, then really all we're doing is hatching to indicate where the shadows are. And so I just began to use that as my way of thinking to understand how I would draw trees. And while I went on to develop that to I think probably a more helpful, more sophisticated degree, fundamentally that's what I was doing. And I didn't realize it. I didn't have the words to think of it. But what I was doing was, instead of drawing the leaves on the tree, I was drawing the effect of the leaves of the tree. And this is the key concept to understand. And I actually think it's easiest to understand with leaves. We're not drawing a tree, and certainly in the leaves, it's easy to see this. We're not drawing, in almost all cases, unless we're very close and the leaves are very big, we're not drawing the individual leaves. Our challenge is that we see them often still, and we know they're there, even if we can't see them exactly. And therefore, we're tempted to start drawing what we know is there, instead of looking at what we're actually seeing and thinking, well, what is this? And what it is an undulating sense of lights and darks with certain colors, depending on the tree, that isn't the same for every tree. The way this canopy looks depends on a range of factors that create the effect. And so what I realized as I began to do more drawings with more trees is that the tree mattered. It wasn't like, oh, a tree. Oh, okay, I can just do that. I had to still think about what I was doing. And it's this thinking all the time, I think, that really is the key to being able to create the way of drawing for the result, for the drawing that we want. So, oh, a tree. Yeah, I know how to draw trees. And so now we do the tree. Because what I came to realize was that different trees look different. And then you're working out, well, why do they look different? Especially when you're not dealing in color, it's not the color of the leaf. So thinking, why do different trees look different? And it's to do with things like the size of the leaves that we see, although how that looks depends on how far away or how close we are to them. So there's another factor that we have to take into account, the closeness or lack of closeness to the leaves that we're seeing. But it's their shape, it's how they hang on the tree. So some leaves, sit up almost vertically off the branch. Others hang incredibly limply, almost like they're about to drop off. Others, every angle in between. And some leaves are every single leaf is sort of just stuck on to the end of a branch. Other trees, you get burst clusters of leaves that all attach at the same point, that kind of all spring out together, almost like in a little pom-pom effect. And so the way the leaves attach to the tree affects what they look like, how the leaves are made, whether the leaves are soft and supple, or whether they're very hard and almost could cut you if you pick them up wrong. Think of pine needles, but even pine needles, some of them are upright and really can be difficult to get, or they hang down, or in the case of many things, um, in different parts of the life cycle of the leaf, it may start when it first forms upright, and then as it ages, it kind of starts to hang more, let's say. so so you have a range of those things in the one tree, is what I'm saying. And so all of these things in life we know are real, and these are all things somehow we want to capture if we're trying to create a sense of realism in what we draw. And if I'm drawing freehand in ink, as I said, I have to work out a way of doing it that the first marks I make on the paper don't stop me by the end creating the effect I want, being able to put the final marks on that will make it come alive and look real. So it was obvious to me with trees that I'm drawing the effect. And when I first did that video, that probably a lot of you came in on my channel from, it's had almost 2 million views now, on drawing the effect of detail. Only it was a field of flowers rather than leaves on a tree that I used for it. Um, um, I was thinking this was a way of drawing things of overwhelming detail. And of course it is. And I then thought, oh, this is a way of drawing nature, because nature is of overwhelming detail. And when I think of the subjects that have caused the most problem for people that I'm aware of, and by that I mean they've asked me questions, or when I've given lessons to people, the problems they have, but particularly just the YouTube videos and the comments I get, or the questions I get. The real problem areas are overwhelming detail, common things. So leaves on a tree, grass, because grass is like leaves on a tree, only 10 times worse, if anything could be. Think of blades of grass and a vast expense of lawn. And because it's on the ground, and the ground is in almost every scene that we go to draw or paint in some way, well, we're talking of draw, then if you don't do anything, you often have this large, what becomes a bit of a boring expanse. And of course, in life, it does have surface texture. It does catch light in certain ways. There is a sense that parts of this grass is closer than the grass on the far side of whatever expanse we're looking at, even if it's relatively close to us still, let alone if it's far away. How do I draw so I capture a sense of distance with grass? Now, the issues are the same. Conceptually, the issues are the same as with a tree, but the marks I find to do it may well be different. Well, they will be different, although some principles will be similar or the same. And so I began to kind of think, oh, okay. And I began to think that this idea of trying to not think of what the object is, but to look at in the particular scene, in the particular context, I'm going to draw this thing or these things. What effect am I trying to capture? Which means I have to start looking at my reference and not thinking, oh, this is grass, not thinking, oh, what sort of tree is this, and try and see what the leaves are, because I'm not going to be drawing the leaves. It's going to be thinking, when I look at this, what's the overall effect of what I'm seeing? What's the visual impact? Now, how do I take that and translate it? And you may have heard me use this word in terms of my thinking, because part of my understanding of the drawing process is that we are translating, if you like, an effect of what we see to marks on the paper, using whatever medium we like to use to put the marks on the paper. So there is this translation step as well. And can I say, if you, I've just in the last few videos, I've got auto dubbing now, speaking of translation on my videos. So the 8 languages that YouTube translates in my latest videos, you can access that. So if you speak English, not English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Hindi, Japanese, Indonesian, Italian, Portuguese, or Spanish, then you can listen to my videos in that language. And more particularly, if you're watching this, I'm assuming you probably know English. But if you've got friends who draw who don't speak English or don't speak it well and do speak one of those languages, please can you share them a link with one of my videos and say, hey, if you go to settings, you can listen to this in whatever of those 8 languages is going to be most helpful. So just thought I'd pop that in. Um, yeah, so came to realize that in fact, when I'm looking at my reference, I'm not trying to see objects that I can do an outline around. What I'm seeing is a visual effect. I'm seeing the way lots of things of all different sizes and shapes look in these circumstances because it's always in these circumstances. It's always connected with how far I am away, what the light conditions are, the lights and darks, therefore, the condition of the things I'm looking at, the age, perhaps is another way of thinking of that. Um, and the yeah, and so what I can't possibly draw that. So what's the effect? Instead of when I look at the life, instead of trying to see all the detail, I'm trying to see less detail. I'm trying to see what are the key things that I focus on. When I draw and how does my mind register those and how can I find marks to create those key things in my drawing as the key things. um, Tracy's asked, why is it best to start in the center of the tree? um, if you've seen any of my, I've got a how to draw trees playlist, and one of the things I say is I think this is a good place, is generally a good place to start if you draw a tree. Um, a few reasons for that. One is one of the biggest problems we have with trees is that we start at the top and we've already got the ground drawn and the canopy comes down too far or not far enough. And we either have, a trunk that ends up looking a bit short and fat for the size of the tree, or it ends up being too long and creates a very different effect, particularly if it's a tree that doesn't have a long trunk before we have the canopy. Or we start at the bottom and we work up, and that's possibly more common because we have the ground there. We often start with the ground because, well, the ground seems a good place to start, and then we go up. And then what happens is we start the leaves in a certain place, and we end up the leaves run off the paper because we've gone up too far with the trunk. Or we finish the tree top, but again, it's now too close to the thickness of the trunk and it doesn't look real. Or we end up with a squat, misshapen tree that doesn't look the way that type of tree, or even any tree, draws. Um, the other reason I like to start in the center of any drawing I do, if that's otherwise a good place to start, is because, again, drawing freehand in ink, I can't rough things out to get a sense of proportion as I move across. And while nature's a little more forgiving, a tree's a little more forgiving than architecture, which is often very precise and exact. Um, if I start in the middle and things aren't quite right, if things are out like a millimeter every width, if I start in the middle, by the time I get to one side, I might be, I don't know, 5 mils out in my proportions. If I start on one side and go right across, being a millimeter out all the way, that error creep means I'm now 10 millimeters out with what's happening, um, with what I'm doing, or up or down. So I just find it helps me to contain error creep, and it means my center is also likely to be more accurate. And I find that's helpful because that's usually, not always, but usually where visually key elements are. And so if I keep that kind of tighter as we move outwards, we can let our drawing, and some people deliberately do this as a stylistic thing, let our style become looser, a little more relaxed in tightness, and that can include in the actual sort of visual reality of the exactness of what we're doing can become looser. Or we could start to deliberately distort angles, such as perspective angles around the edges, to create a bit of a fishbowl effect. whatever. So, but usually in the center, we want things to be more precise. And the other thing is when it comes to a tree and a tree canopy, one of the big problems when we draw from photos is that trees end up looking like they're a shape. And so we draw them as a shape. I'm talking to the canopy here. Okay. But in fact, in life, that tree is probably has parts of it coming towards me, and on the other side, parts of it moving away from me. And the parts that are coming towards me are actually closer, usually, than what I see at the very top of the tree. That's normally kind of like on the axis more, if it's a fairly symmetrical canopy. And so, um, and the parts that come closest to me, branches that are coming straight out or angled almost straight out, they're more likely to be in the center, a bit lower down, because they're older branches and they've grown more. Branches grow from the tip out. So a longer branch that's been growing longer will be longer. Growing for longer will be longer. And so the leaves I look at in the center of a tree in a photo are probably on the ends of branches that are closest to me. And I always have a good study before I start to draw of a tree canopy and try and work out what I see. And therefore those leaves, so if I want to create the sense of depth, if I want to put back into my drawing what the photo has kind of taken out, and this is why photos aren't perfect and we shouldn't try and copy a photo. Otherwise we copy all the weaknesses of photos. But if I do that, what I want to do is give a sense that the leaves that are closest, and having heavier, darker marks on the paper is one of the ways I can do that. And I find that the first marks I make are often heavier or darker simply because I'm still trying to find my mark making for this drawing. And so it's better if they're in the center and they're in a part of a canopy that's closest to me. That'll do for now. But yeah, I'll get back to what I was saying. So with trees and with nature, I realized that I began to trying to capture the effect. And at some point, I suddenly realized that, hang on, everything is effect. Everything is trying to capture the effect of what we see, even the architecture. Now, often the effect with the architecture is very geometric. And so an outlining type mark might still be the best way to capture that for a realistic effect overall in my drawing. But with architecture, there are lots of other parts of architecture that where it's more like nature, it's more like leaves on a tree, where you have really intense decoration, particularly if it's an interior scene. Then trying to draw that detail, even though in life we can see it as all hard edge and continuous line, perhaps, or a series of small repeated shapes and we could draw each one. In life, though, we don't see all that detail all at once, but if we draw it on our drawing, we will. And so it will start to introduce a sense of, if we do it superbly, it'll introduce a sense of hyperrealism. If we don't do it superbly, it'll just overdrawn and very cartoon-like, despite all the work we put into it. So instead, I realized that what we're doing is we're with that architectural decoration, or it could be ornamentation on the outside of the building as well. It could be the figures in a pediment, particularly if we see them from a long way away, that I'm really trying to capture the feel of those figures in a pediment. And actually, I do have a couple of videos. They're a couple of years old now. So they're quite a way back in my, whatever, 12 to 1300 videos that I've posted. But if you find them, they're a great example of drawing the effect of detail with a non-nature subject. And I think it's in my mind, the only way of capturing pediment figures for people, for artists, for anyone who doesn't feel experienced in drawing figures, so that they end up blending in beautifully with the building rather than looking freaky because, they've got all arms twisted in unnatural positions and whatnot. It comes down to how we think. We have to, just as with trees, we have to not see the leaves as leaves, because then we're tempted to draw the leaves. with the pedimental sculptures, we have to not see them as figures. We have to not see them as people, because then we start to draw little heads and eyes and ears and a neck and shoulders and a waist. And suddenly we realize we're too close to the bottom now to draw the legs. So they have little squat, fat legs, even if everything else has been drawn well. So, yeah, it's seeing the visual effect. And with pedimental sculptures, it's often the effect of light and shadow that we really see. They capture the shadows in certain way, and particularly in neoclassical structures where they're swathed in fabric that hangs. It also hangs and catches in certain ways, and it's often there'll be there'll be, I don't know, like a point where the fabric kind of, you know, twists, and these shadow marks catch it, and also the silhouette edge that helps define what's happening. And so that's what we want to capture. And I also pay attention to where the elbows and the knees are, and if the belly sticks out or whatever those, if you like, tension points in the figure are. And often before I start to draw the figure, I'll look at the reference, I'll look at the space I've got to put that figure in, and I'll put dots where I think the elbows and the knees are going to be, or two or three of them at least. And my other tip for drawing figures, even human figures in a street scene, always draw the head smaller than you think it needs to be. It almost always is. And don't draw the neck either at all or till you've drawn the head and the body, because it's so hard to get the neck right and therefore position the shoulders correctly. If you start from the top and work down, if you kind of block the torso, pop the little head on top, and then you can, if you feel it needs another line, you can either do the neck, or you could just add a bit of scarfing or collar or something as well. I mean, under drawing small, if you like, background elements is always the key in life. A common mistake in drawing is making these things stand out. But going back to, I realized that, in fact, with everything, when we draw, we're actually capturing the effect of detail. We're not drawing the object, we're not copying the object, we're still copying it in a way that captures all the factors that work with something when we see it in life, to try and that therefore creates a sense of realism. And so, a pretty common thing is a sense of distance. So even with something such as this rooftop view of Oxford, we can see that we want a sense of, yes, although they are shapes and there is a great sense of geometry here, I mean, there are some, if you like, surface textures, there are some effects of the way the roofs are made and the colors that they are, that I thought was helpful to try and find marks to introduce. But basically, they are lots of outline shapes. But the important thing with distance is to get a sense of far away. So, the obvious way we can create that effect is to be changing the strength of our line and also the detail that we draw, because we see less detail far away than what we see close of the same thing. So we show more detail with stronger lines, with darker ink effects closer than what's midground and further away. And sometimes that we have to juggle that, because we find that, well, the closest things, such as down here, are important, but probably this is the more important area, the more, if you like, obvious centerpiece. But if we do this with the most emphasized effect, it's not going to sit in the depth properly. So, what I did here was I made this a little bit, just a little bit stronger than I would have if the obvious focal point had been further down, because I still wanted this to have a certain strength, a certain presence, and also it's what's, if you like, behind it. But from a drawing sense of view, it's what's around it that really has the far distance. And so it's the distance between this and this, which is the really big gap, big difference, much further than, say, down here to here. So making this a little bit stronger also emphasized the distance between here and the things behind. So that also worked out well. That also kind of suited. Um, but it's all to do with drawing the effect of what we see, not the actual not the actual drawing. Um, so in terms of trees, this is a fairly recent drawing of a church tower, seen um, glimpsed between some of the trees and shrubs that surround it. So on this side, we have a tree, and again, silhouette edges, really important. Now, if I'd thought, oh, a tree canopy, I need to outline the canopy, and I began to draw a continuous line, even if it was a fairly, bumpy line, um, it's really not going to capture, I don't think, very effectively what we see in life. And yet I don't want it to get too bitsy either. And it's not just a silhouette, there are lights and darks, there are values involved as well. So, yeah, how do I do that? But then how do I get marks that I can keep, if you like, separate visually from other marks that I might use for other objects that are close? So, take the branches and the trunk. Um, What do I do? Well, I put my marks in a different direction, or it hasn't got to be as my foliage marks tend to be on the vertical side, and my branch and trunk marks tend to be sort of on the horizontal side. But if you look at over here, you can see that even though the marks tend towards being horizontal, there are certainly parts where they're more at 45 degrees, because they're also reflecting what I felt was the angle coming out to me of the growth of that particular shrub. And we do have some kind of almost horizontal marks coming out. Now, I can't draw that if I haven't worked out how I represent foliage. But I also can't draw that if I haven't observed all of this in the reference first. And when we start trying to draw this way, it takes a lot of time, because what I discover is part of my problem of my drawings not turning out the way I want is I don't think about them enough before I start to draw. And if you were to watch my drawing process, it would be misleading in that respect. I don't mean in the videos. I mean if you were to watch me in life, because it would look like I start to draw, pretty quickly. Just after I've done my exploratory marks, I otherwise only looking at things for a minute or two. But that's because I've built up the skill of knowing what to find when I'm going to need certain information, the visual information. I've now worked out from the way I understand the drawing process, and by consistently applying it drawing after drawing and doing as many drawings as I do. Thank you, YouTube videos, because I do a lot more drawings than I would do if I wasn't making videos. It kind of pushes me to, well, I need to do a drawing, I think, today. Haven't done one for a few days. But the repetition, and I think doing a similar types of subjects is really, really helpful for learning our skills more efficiently as well as more effectively. When we do something efficiently, we do it the right way. We do that thing the way that will get us results as quickly as possible. When we do something effectively, we're doing the right job. We're doing the thing that we want to do. We're doing the thing that's going to give us the results that we want. It can be put, I think I first heard it as, when we work effectively, we're doing the right job. When we work efficiently, we're doing the job right. And so that's what we want. We want to be doing the right job with our drawing, and we want to be doing it in the right way. We want to be doing what will get us the results we're after, and we want to do it in the most efficient way so that we're not losing unnecessary time or energy or confidence or whatever in in the time that we do spend drawing. Yeah, so it's um and with the architecture too. I mean, yep, there are more lines there, but there's no heavy outline, although lines do define the shape. Um, and I've also got lines. This was a backlit scene, so there was just really a little bit of direct sunlight, and I wanted to have that sense of this is backlit. I could have changed the tower and made it front lit, or just put the shade on one side, though that wouldn't have rung true with the light direction on the foliage and so forth. So, you know, yeah, I think it's good to try and draw what I'm seeing, because that forces me into doing less comfortable subjects in less comfortable ways, and it forces me to experiment with my results more. So again, that's this, but if in my thinking I'm trying to see the effects, then I have to work out what marks will capture those effects. And as you know, I do that. I do that with every drawing. And in fact, that was my mark making for that drawing that you just saw, playing around with the proportions, a little bit with the leaves, the silhouette edges. That's a different part of the drawing. And this is to do with the little. This is to do with the little low hedge down in the bottom center. So this was my just playing around with marks, experimenting to get to practice proportions, to practice silhouettes, to practice values, to practice linking things together next to each other. There was probably, at most 3 minutes work in doing that. But in doing that, of course, I'm having to work out. I'm having to already do my initial thinking. Think, well, what's going to be a problem? What do I want to make sure I've got marks to create before I start the drawing? What effect am I trying to create? Will the marks create that? And so forth. And then I do it. And what this way of thinking, this way that everything I see is really a visual effect, and how I draw it is to find marks that will translate the reality visual effect into a visual effect on the paper that creates a realistic scene, realistic enough for me. And what I found was that this particularly, I mean, I knew it works for trees, I knew it works for grass, I knew it worked for flower beds and things. But what I came to learn was that this worked. I'm just distracted because I'm trying to find something. But what I found was that this works really. Oh, where's yesterday's drawing? I've got a whole bunch of. Here it is. But what I learned was that this worked really well for nature. That this now was a way I could see things in life that were quite complex. Where's the drawing? Hang on, where's the photo for this? Yeah. So here's the reference I used. So how would you draw that? How would you change that to something that you could use an ink pen to create on paper? And probably you're thinking, oh, well, the trees are easy enough because I can just outline them. But gosh, this sort of stuff's going to be tricky. And how do you kind of untangle that? How do you draw that detail with all those different trees that step back and are all kind of blurred together? And what about down here and over here? And gosh, how do you do this without it just looking kind of just like lots of little lines on top of each other? Because when you're looking at shapes, when you're looking at objects that you can see, and you're thinking that drawing is putting lines around objects, outlining objects, then this sort of thing does feel impossible to draw. But if you understand, from a thought process, if you understand that instead of trying to draw the detail, you're trying to step back, almost like blur your eyes a bit and see an overall effect, which is often a value effect. It's often you're seeing the lights and darks and the edges where these come together that create a certain effect. And then you're thinking, what marks can I use to capture that effect. Everything from continuous lines to dots and dashes and hatching in certain ways. But look at look at the tree here. Look at this tree here. Okay, where you've got this, I think it's a xanthipus, this spiky plant come in. It looks like it grows horizontally, but it actually all of those long, thin, spiky, well, they're leaves in effect, but yeah, they're more like sticks. Go back to a central point, a bit like a palm tree on the top of a palm, because they do grow up off the ground. But you see, where it comes in front of the tree, see that I haven't got the tree drawn through it, and just see how that really helps the plant on the left to really stand out as being closer than the tree. But the other thing is that what happens in life when we see these when we see these things is that it creates, I think of them as a visual disruption. It stops us seeing what's behind clearly. It disrupts our ability to see things the way we would if they weren't there. And so what I want to do is not necessarily copy that exactly, but I want to create as similar a visual disruption as I can. And so I'm trying to disrupt our ability to see this as a nice, smooth, continuous, dark value, because that's the effect in life. So I'm trying to create a similar effect in my drawing. So if you haven't seen this, I posted this about 12 hours ago, I think. Um, yeah, maybe 10 hours ago. So you can watch this with a voiceover. I actually also have a little clip where I walk to the spot, and you can just see some of the context, some of the bush around it. The photo I took 2 days before I took yesterday's clip, which was in glorious sunshine. The photo's on a shady day, so it's a shame I didn't take the photo yesterday. But it would have changed the drawing because the lighting conditions were different. And this is when it comes to capturing an effect, it is very specific to the conditions of the moment. Um, and again, if you look at what I've done, down the front, we have this plant here, which is close enough, the fern there. Um, I find these ferns, they're all over the place where I live. I find them pretty tricky. Um, There they are. They're just what we call bracken. I don't know what you call them. Um, so again, they're a bit closer, so there will be more detail, but I don't want to get caught up drawing them too exactly. And so you can see the marks I found there. Trying to make something look a little more exact when it's not really is part of the skill that we develop, and we only do it by practicing. It's no good really you're copying what I'm doing, what, because then you'll just overthink it and put all the attention that you actually don't want to put in it, when you do it yourself from something that I haven't drawn, that you're not copying from. But what I always suggest to do is to look at what I'm doing, listen to my demos, listen to what I say, see how they happen. Watch at least some of my videos in real time. I'm trying to post more of my videos as real-time videos, um, because I think it's really helpful to see me put the marks on the paper, to have a sense of what's actually involved in the drawing process. Because the problem with a sped up video is, even though you know it's sped up, you don't really appreciate what my real time is. And my real time, because of the amount of practice I've had and the confidence that's given me, and the ways of thinking I've developed to think quickly, even at real time, I'm probably, for a lot of it, going faster than perhaps you could do with the same control over getting to a desired end result. But we will all pick up the pace and improve all of those things with considered practice, the more practice we do. I said, as long as it's considered, otherwise we just learn to make the same mistakes very quickly and very easily over and over again. So it's not practice that makes perfect, but it's intentional, well considered practice towards a certain endpoint that makes perfect. Well, not perfect, but improves. Um, so what we need to do, and if we look at this tree here, again in life, it's kind of a bit of a rough, lumpy, bumpy affair, and it's black partly because it's been burnt. It's not all because of shadow or shade. Um, so I'm trying to create the effect of something lumpy and bumpy, and there's no right way to put the lines. There's just what lines put how combined in what way are going to create the values, the lights and darks, and values in a black and white drawing also create color effects as well. We need to remember that. Um, but also, I'm trying to create a sense of three dimensions. That photo, I could cut the tree out of that photo and it's just a shape. But the reality is it's three dimensions. It curves around. And so I actually want to even, because of a photo flattens things and makes them look flat even when they're round, I want to make my drawing look rounder than the photo is. And again, this is how we create a sense of realism. If I start with the photo as my, if you like, in inverted commas, copying point and try and copy it, I'll end up with, if you like, less than the photo because I can't do the photo. And therefore, the photo, which is already looking flat, will be, my drawing I'm trying to copy an already flat photo will look even flatter. So instead, I have to disregard that visual element of the photographic process, and I have to work at, for my drawing, finding the marks that will put back in the weakness that the photo has taken out. And so again, I'm creating an effect of reality, or I'm trying to, rather than copying. The way we think is so important. And we've got to have confidence to believe that I actually can understand what's here better than a photo can show it. The other thing I really want to just point out is this plant here on the extreme left. Now, the way most of us, when we saw that, we'd probably either leave it out, which is what I used to do, or we think, oh, this is impossible, I don't want to draw this. And we really would have just done something like this. I'm just doing it here. I won't try and hold it up and do. Okay, so here's the tree, and basically think, oh well, all of those leaves, this was technically what they are like a line, so I'll just do lines to try and copy each one. But that doesn't create the effect in my drawing that each one of those combines together to create in reality. Because in reality, some are closer than others, some are in the light and some are in the shade, and some are and some are shaded, and some are capturing shadows cast by more exterior ones, and that creates a certain effect that looks three-dimensional. That just looks like a lot of lines stuck on top of each other. That has pretty much no depth at all. But have a look now. Having said that, have a look at what I've done in trying to find. I actually started again. If you look at the demo of this video, which was posted last night in my time, and if you look at the way I do it, I actually start by doing a lot of the lightest lines I could do. Not all of them, but just trying to, and really paying attention to the direction. I really observed carefully where some of the most visually prominent of those lines in the photo were invariably the closest ones that were capturing the light more. And I really focused on their angle and how far out they came into the picture frame. And also how many actually, if you like, interrupted our view of the tree that they're slightly in front of. Because I particularly and then how I did the marks to, if you like, outline the tree. I say outline the tree, but there are really a series of broken dots and dashes that I used. And if you look at the left side of the tree there, you can see some of them still there, still visible. That's how I established where that tree was going to be. But I couldn't start to do anything around it, such as the hatching on the trunk or on the leaves around it, until I knew where some of these leaves, these long, thin, strappy leaves were going to be, so that I could leave space that we could read, that we could understand as these are some of these long leaves that are catching the light and they're in front of what's behind. But equally, there are places where these leaves are catching the shadow, but we're seeing the shadow in the direction of those leaves, those long strappy leaves, where they're bundled together and they're almost like a cord. So that's I think that's what we're talking about. Haven't seen a comment for a long time. Can someone just give me a comment so I know that there's still someone out there? It still seems to be. I don't think there's been a problem with the streaming from my side that I can see, but can someone just say still here? Yes, thank you. Osmanauta. Yeah. So can you see that? And obviously, thanks, Brazen. And if you look maybe more down here behind my finger there, where there's a bit of a crisscrossing effect. See, that took a little bit longer to do. I mean, but I'm only still talking minutes. So it's obviously quicker to do that and not to have to worry about it. But if you do that, you don't get this, and drawing these, because these are very common in this bushland that's around where I live, drawing these, is a challenge. And it's something that I think I've improved at and I hope to get a little bit better at. But I'm certainly happy with the direction it's going. And the solutions for me to be able to draw them all come from thinking. It's from the way I think about it. Firstly, and then that thinking of what am I doing in the drawing process, I'm not copying that. Therefore, I'm not drawing lots of individual leaves, copying what I see. I'm looking at it and thinking visually, what hits me? What's the effect of all of these together? And it's exactly the same principle as I use with a tree canopy. It's just that it's a very different, if you like, tree canopy. And then what marks will create that. Again, if you haven't hit the like button and you've been finding this interesting, please hit the like button now for me. That would be great. And sometimes the effects are very light driven, and sometimes there's so much light we actually draw almost nothing there, because we get a stronger effect if we put no ink there, because I only have ink. It's black or white. And yes, I can do lines that are lighter, but unless I choose to use a grayscale pen, and that's something I think I'll explore for a bit of fun in the future. But basically at the moment it's black or white. And so sometimes no marks creates the effect, even though we can see things in there in the bright sunlight, than some marks. And really our ability using the one color, if you like, to create various values is all about the heaviness of the line and how close together they are. And by heaviness, I don't really mean the thickness. I mean how heavy and the speed how wide the pen is, but how how slowly and deliberately or not we move the pen. We connect the ink as it flows onto the paper. When I do a really quick line, it's not just, and this is a really important point, and it's more important the more textured the paper we draw on is. If we draw in 100% absolute dead smooth rolled glass-like paper, then it's not going to be to the same effect as if we draw with a rougher tooth. The paper I draw on does have a slight roughness to it. But when we do a light line quickly, then we get irregular edges because the ink is not sitting on all the paper evenly. And where the tooth kind of lifts slightly, then parts of the very edge, the ink will just skim the tops of the tooth rather than down into the valleys of the teeth, whatever irregularities in the paper there are. Rather than running smoothly and evenly, which is what we're more likely to get even at a fast speed on a very, very smooth sheet of paper. So that gives me lines that if we put them close together, introduce a certain grayness that we don't get if the edges of all my lines are fairly straight. Does that make sense? So it's coming to understand, but different materials will create that or give that option more than other materials. And we must never forget that the paper we draw on is one of the materials. It's just as significant as the pen we use for the effect we're going to get at the end. So it's not saying one's better than the other. They create different effects. What effect do I want? And if it's ideally the best pen and the best paper, that's great. If it's not, can I change the way I do it slightly to still create the effect as well as I can, the best way I can? Yeah. So, but it all comes down to how we think, how we think. And I find for me, the way that I've developed thinking that gets me to the place I want to get with how my drawings look has been to be thinking, what's the visual effect of what I'm seeing, regardless of what it is, whether it's a tree, whether it's a face, whether it's a bushland scene. Now, what marks will create that effect? And then I experiment with those. And then I start to put the marks on the paper. But the process then is to be stepping into all of the scene all at once. And obviously, we can't do it all at once, but I try and establish where key things are as early as I can. And my initial marks, if at all possible, are always lighter rather than heavier. And even where I establish some stronger values at the start, they're not as strong as I think they're going to be, because I know I can't make the final adjustments of value until the end when I do that for the whole thing. When I do all that tweaking, which can make the world of difference, but I haven't got enough information in my mind to be able to do that straight off, because I'm not copying the photo. I'm drawing something. I'm creating a drawing. I'm using the photo as my starting point. I'm changing it, at least in as many ways as possible, to make it better. But I'm also changing it because I simply can't reproduce. I simply can't copy so much of what I see. I can't copy something that is like four color pixelated kind of continuous ink with this. I can do dots and dashes and little lines and long lines, but I can't do a four color process print. So I can't. It's a deceit to think that I can copy the photo anyway. And if I'm drawing in life, if I'm sitting in the bush, it's exactly the same process, except that I can see more clearly to begin with. If I were to go and sit in that, if you look at the video I posted yesterday, that little drawing I've been holding up, and when I'm walking up and approaching it, two things. One is, what you see in the video is much wider than the photo. It's a landscape video. It's a portrait photo. And I cropped the photo to get the composition I really wanted. So you're going to see a whole lot more, which may make it look a little bit different. And also the depth is compressed in the photo, whereas that spiky plant coming in from the left is actually quite a long way from the two trees. And you'll realize that if you see the approach as I walk up towards the trees. And then I walked past the trees, and I actually took another photo of a lovely little scene that I might draw today. Not sure. Got to mow the bottom yard today, as I call it. I think what you got, the lower 40 is the Midwest phrase, is it? It's almost that. Snake land is the other thing we call it. Yeah. Let's have a look. Does the size of the drawing affect the size of pen you choose to start drawing with? Yeah, thicker pen. Yep. The answer is yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It all depends what you're wanting to create and what pens and what you're wanting the process to be as well for that drawing, and therefore what's going to be the best choice. But in general terms, the smaller the paper, the finer the pen we use. Even if we use it, I mean, if I do a drawing that's this size, this is a nice drawing, the effective detail one, versus this one. Although the drawings aren't that different, just the sheet of paper is different. But if I do a larger drawing, larger sheet of paper, and I'm using, say, 3 or 4 pens. So in this one, I deliberately chose to use the one pen because I wanted it to be a fairly fast drawing, and I wanted it to be the sort of process that I could do on location, not fiddling around too much. So this is actually all drawn with a 0.1, and I try to create a variability in the marks I made doing that. This one, I think I use 4 pens, certainly 3, probably 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, and maybe even a 0.05 in the background. But if I was doing this same scene a bit smaller, I might have just used the 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. The brand of pen that I'm playing around with at the moment, these uni pens, they have a 0.4 as well as a 0.2 in the disposable, which is good. So I've sort of got a 0.5, a 0.4, a 0.2, a 0.3, 0.2, 0.1, 0.05, and 0.03. And I haven't used the 0.5 yet. But yeah, so I'm playing around with a greater variation of sizes. So, but yeah, there's no always. I think it's very unhelpful to think, well, this is the way you do it, this is the way I do it. It's always our thinking. It's always, what am I trying to achieve, and what will get me there in the best way? What will lead towards what I'm after. Yeah, I'm and let me just show up. I'll just show you a couple of my earlier, because they're just here. I'm trying to sort of stack my drawings so that similar sorts of things are next to each in piles so that I can find them. Let me show you 2 of my drawings, because I talked about we learn and we improve. So these are some more relatively recent bushland drawings that I'm really happy with, of Australian bush. I'll just keep it to the Australian bush. So these are the sorts, and this is the one yesterday I did that you'll see that video for if you look at yesterday's video, and I really would recommend it. Really would. It really ties in well with this. So these are some of my more recent ones. Let me show you 2 of my earlier ones. Now, these actually were demos for videos. So, I'm sort of horrified is not the right word, but I smile when I see these now, because I think they're so much less successful than I think how I can do this now. And so this is one. This is the better one of the two, but we still get lost here. You see, there's not. It's too. I was going to say it's too black and white. Little artist joke there, but it's a bit hard to see what's happening. We can tell there's trees fairly quickly, but then it's a bit of work to kind of disentangle the marks. So that's an earlier one where I think I was on the path, hadn't found quite the best place to sit on the path. And so I'm still playing around still, but there are things there that I think work, and I don't know, you might like it, I don't know, but um, uh, tell me though, do you in a comment, if you're watching this now, do you think, do you find that you get a bit lost here? There's a bit too much white that's not helpfully white. The white isn't nuanced enough, I think, and that makes it harder to see what's happening. But you can see some little things like, the hatching going the other way. And this is probably one of the most successful parts, I think, simply because there are more values and there's more variance in the mark making there. The other one I think is a bit, I don't know if you've heard the expression dog's breakfast. Sorry to all the dogs lovers, but it looks like a bit of a dog's breakfast to me. But this was I think it was a video on one of my first tree videos on drawing. Yeah, I agree, Jen, on drawing large trees. And I just think, whoa, man, like, yeah. What happened was I got lost in the technique and I lost the subject. I wasn't, I was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, I think, from my reference to the drawing, just looking at the little bit I was doing. And I wasn't stopping to have those big picture views where we are looking at the overall effect of what we're referencing and then the overall effect that we're creating. And by the time I realized it was very lost at the end, and I began to put some really stronger contrast in trying to save it, because I said I was recording it, or was for a demo. Yeah. So before I did that, it was even more of a tangle of little lines. So and particularly sort of in here. No, in here. I think in here it gets really lost, and just compositionally, it's too much the same. There's not enough focal point. There's just all that darkness, but that's not necessarily the same thing. It does draw the eye, but that's no good if it's drawing the eye to what is still a tangle. So, yeah. Thanks, Brazen. That reminds you to hit the like button for me, and subscribe if you found this helpful, or maybe check out some of my other live sessions. They're pretty long, so grab a cup of coffee and maybe do some gardening or washing up or sorting the washing or ironing or whatever you do when you like to listen to things. So, look, I thought that might, in terms of what I have, oh, look, here's one more picture. That's a cottage at Marie Antoinette's hamlet at Versailles. But look at the thatch roof. Okay, so if we're thinking of capturing the visual effect and of edges, particularly look at that top and angled line on the left-hand side. It would have been so easy to have simply drawn a line, a smooth line, a continuous line, instead of finding marks that create the visual effect that we see in reality. And I think this is a really good example of what I'm saying. Again, if you look at the hedge, trying to find marks for the hedge, but it's not just finding marks for the hedge, but it's finding marks for the hedge that look like a hedge here, but don't look like the same marks that I've used for other things that aren't hedges in this drawing. So it's also finding a variety of marks, and that shape, that's direction, it's the way we combine them, it's values we create, it's the thickness of the pen, it may be the color of the pen, certainly the edges of the area of where the marks are and so forth, and how we come up behind them with other marks. All of these things are, I think, important, because if all, and that's part of the problem with this. So many of the marks ended up just being the same, and in the end, all I could do was keep layering more and more on top of each other, just trying to create a different value that might actually disentangle something from this, lineal mess, which is a challenge with trees, because in a sense, the tree canopy is very similar all the way over. It really is just the values often. With something such as this, there are different textures and surfaces. But again, therefore, we want a variety of marks to indicate the variety of visual effects that we have. And if you look at the tree, so this tree peak in here is much, much closer than this tree over here. So it would have been easy to have used the same marks for both and not created the sense that something is much further away and something is much closer. And I think it's particularly important to get the sense of much closer for the one on the right, because that tree is actually probably the closest thing that we see. I think it's certainly, it reads to me as closer than the hedge, even the hedge at the right-hand side of the page. And it's, I think, very important, or very helpful rather, for a sense of what I call visual drama, which is maybe just a pretentious way of saying interest. Visual drama, to have as long a sense of depth of plane as possible. And the way we do that is by having things in the front that feel very close. See, if I'd basically drawn almost nothing down here, and these were the first things we were looking at, then the depth of this drawing is kind of from here to these background things. But now it's from here to these background things. So the sense of viewing up the path is vastly extended by having things really close down the front. Now, we don't usually want them to be the eye grabbers, because we don't usually want to grab attention almost off the page. Usually it's something more in the center, or there's a certain rhythm or something. But if there's something down here that we still register, then that extends the depth of plane, and it really, really amps up the, how do you say the word, dynamism? The dynamic sense of movement from close to back. So yeah, there's another thought. Here's another early, this was a very early bushland one. It was probably my earliest one where I thought, I think that's successful. And you can see that the lines are a little, I'll say heavy-handed, but I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean that they're kind of far more, there's obviously less variety in how I'm making the marks, which is just one less, I suppose, therefore one less way of being expressive. But I did feel like there was a nice sense of, closer, not as close but closer, not as close but closer, a bit further away, and then getting into the distance with this one. And again, notice with this closest tree, I didn't draw two straight lines down each side, because I'm not enclosing shapes with an outline. I'm trying to create a visual effect. Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you, darling. My wonderful wife with a warm cup of freshly brewed coffee. Yep. I got up early when she was still asleep just to get ready for this. Oh, yes. Yes, I was hoping for this at some stage. I knew she was up, though, because I can hear the washing machine on. Yeah. I'll pass on that, Osmond. I'll let her know. So since I've got a coffee now, I may as well sit here a little bit longer and answer any questions that any one of the 23 people here. I'll let her know, Grace. And I passed that. I think you said that one time before. and I certainly passed on your message." And she smiled and said, "Oh, that's kind." So, um, yeah, she's a bit like a war widow sometimes, a YouTuber widow. "Oh, you're not doing one of those now, are you? Oh, I thought we might do this," you know? Yeah. Or she wants to sit and relax watching telly, and I'm entering the metadata while I'm watching it for the video that I finally finished. No, she's not an artist as such. No, I don't teach her to draw. She doesn't want to draw. She likes the piano, though she doesn't play it nearly enough. Um, Finds it hard to kind of find the time to sit down and relax with it. She actually has a science degree. So there you go. There are people who have those. It's a good thing we're all different, aren't we? Um, yeah, yeah. So, but we were in high school together, and we were in high school when we were in the middle of high school when Elton John's "Goodbye Yellow Brick Road" came out, and we both drew. If anyone knows the album, and as in the record with the sleeve with the cardboard fold out bit, there were lots of colored pencil hand drawings. It was all colored pencil drawn. So, and there was for "Candle in the Wind," there was a drawing of from a famous photo of Marilyn Monroe, and we both drew that in colored pencils. So yeah, yeah. I remember her showing me at school. We used to sit next to each other in some of our classes. Um, yes, we knew each other at school. Went out at school for a bit too. Although then we broke up and then we got back together at some stage later. Yep. And now we're we're an old couple. But we were young ones. Yeah. Okay. Any questions about drawing? Any questions you'd like to ask me about my drawing journey, or about the drawing process? Any things you struggle with? I need a mug with my artwork. Oh yeah, but I don't mind. I don't mind. I don't mind Van Gogh's artwork either. Yeah, this isn't my normal. Oh, I see. It's a two shot. She's made me a two shot instead of a one shot. I normally have a King Charles III coronation mug that my son brought me back from a trip to London last year. Yeah. What troubles you with drawing? What do you struggle with? And it might be a technical thing, or it might be more psychological. Um, but it might just be something you haven't been able to improve on, and you've been giving it attention, and you're getting frustrated, and you're even thinking, "Oh, I better just stop drawing that subject," or whatever. Have I ever considered doing an etching or wood carving? I did do. Give me a second, and I'll just run and get wood carving. I did do. Hang on, coming back. I'm on my way. Okay, I had to run to the room where the wood carvings were. I did these. Oh, the kids were young. We were living in a different house. It was a different time, a different world. But for some reason, I've never been a wood person. I've never been a handyman kind of working with tools sort of person. But for some reason, I took a fancy to looking at wood carving. I thought, I should buy some chisels, and then I bought a bit of wood. I think this is beech. Certainly nothing on the back. And of course, I discovered that wood carving chisels are very expensive. And it wasn't a time of life where we had much money, but because we had so many kids. And then of course as well, what will I carve? It might have been from looking at frames of old. Anyway, I carved two things in the end, and the first one is this. See, little Art Nouveau panel, and I got this from. It's that railway. There's a railway pavilion opposite Karlskirche in Vienna that I think was by Otto Wagner. I have 4 children, and I have 2 grandchildren now. um, Otto Wagner, and it's an Art Nouveau pavilion, and it's got like an arch over the entrance. And this relief is actually not in a straight relief, but it's actually arched, and it's repeated, and there's more to it. So this is kind of like an adapted section of it. So yep, that was one. And I just left that bare. I wasn't sure whether you were meant to sand them or just carve them. I didn't know what the rules were. I was a bit hung up on it must be a right way. The other one is a little bit different, and I got this from I think it's from a book from the 1910s or 1920s. Goodness, it's covered in dust, and who knows what that is. I'll just wipe that off. And that's this. So again, it's same piece of beach. Yeah, so that's that. But I guess I don't know. I guess you'd call that high relief, would you? Anyway, that was just that's my wood carving, and I've got a half finished one down in the workshop that's been half finished for 25 years or something. So, yeah, there's that too. Yeah. So, any other questions about art, about drawing? If you haven't told me where you are, let me know. I'm in Sydney, Australia, and it's now just after 9 a.m. I posted a question on my previous video, house drawing, a few hours ago, but I think you have answered it. Okay, great. Texas. Have a lot of people in Texas. Welcome. Chicago. Very good. I had a friend who's sadly no longer with us, but he came from Chicago. So I always think of him. In the USA. I have lots of subscribers in the USA. Lots of people drawing in the USA. Good on you. I feel you. I raised 6. Yeah. Well done. Would I consider using colored inks with fountain pens? I mean, like 2D color. Yeah. Yes, I've certainly considered it, and there's no reason not to. I'm not a purist, but I just find by nature I like to stay in a state. Yeah, I knew that, Brazen. You're a Texan, proud Texan. But I was sent some pens by some people. Where are they? Oh, here they are. I haven't used these. Maybe some of you have. Neo Preco color, and I haven't. I never used them at the time. By Deleter. So I suspect these are particularly designed for cartoon comic work, because they sent me some paper too that was very, very smooth, like manga anime stuff. Arizona. Yep. Yeah. Welcome, Scott. Yeah. And I was actually looking at these about a week or 2 weeks ago, thinking, making some marks, thinking I could use these. I was thinking of using like grayscale, playing around for that with creating depth effects, as well was the sort of first thing I was thinking. But of course, we can, but it's not quite the same as color. But yeah. And I did in 1980. Was it 1980 or 81? It was when I first started teaching, as in English and history. I did buy some Derwent color pencils, which for my generation, like, we were too poor to have them at school. We always had the cheap brands, but the Derwents were what the rich kids had. And but I was earning an income, and I bought my own, and I did some drawings, really using the color pencils more like paint, like building up with lots and lots of different strokes of different colors, and creating. I didn't have any understanding actually of color theory at the time, so it'd be interesting to try that again now, because I'm sure the pencils are still somewhere. And I do have a lot of pastels that I've probably got $1,000 worth of pastels, and I've done 2 pastel drawings from them, so that wasn't a great success, but I probably should have another go with the pastels actually, as a graphic form with color, because I have all the materials. So, um, okay, right. Guy has drawn incredible miniature houses with grey shade markers. Oh, look, honestly, there's no end of what we can do with our imagination. No end at all. Yeah, yeah. And if you didn't hear earlier, I do have now auto dubbing translation on my videos. That only got activated about a week ago. So it doesn't seem to be on my live session videos, but it's on the other videos. And so the languages are English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Hindi, Japanese, and Indonesian. There's 8 of them. I think that's 8. So if you know people who like to draw and who speak those languages and whose English is not very good, then please let them know that they can start to watch my channel and listen to them dubbed into their own language. It was quite funny. I went through each of the languages to hear the voice that they were doing. I think I sound quite good in French. It's obviously not my voice; it's an AI voice, but I didn't think it was like too bad, the different voices, and it's a different voice in every language as well. But I thought it was all kind of approximately in the ballpark. You listen to the Japanese. Yeah, yeah. It's funny. Honestly, it's such a crazy world we live in now. So many things that really rock my socks. It's good, just strange that it's not your voice yet. Well, I guess my voice sounds a bit different to me anyway when I look at it on video. Everyone I can recommend, you two are old enough, they don't understand how to. Yeah, yeah, there is that, isn't it? Getting older. Well, that's funny. My wife used, she used YouTube way before me. If she wanted something done around the house that I wouldn't do, she'd say, "Well, I'm going to do it myself," and she'd YouTube it and work out what she had to go and buy. And whereas the only thing before I had my own channel, the only thing I used YouTube for was to discover how to tie a full Windsor knot, which is a fancy tie that doesn't come loose. And um, but I only wear a tie when I go to a wedding or a funeral, and neither of those are very frequent these days. So every time I had to go, I'd forget how I did it, so I'd have to type in how to tie a full Windsor knot. But I'll never forget the day my wife, she Googled how to install your own reverse cycle air conditioner. And then she was trying to say to me, "Stephen, we can do this ourselves. We don't have to pay for someone. It's not that hard." I was saying, "You got to be joking." You got to be joking. I hesitate to plug the toaster in, and you want me to, watch a video and install a reverse system air conditioning, which I'm sure is actually illegal to do. I don't think it's a home handyman job anyway. Uh, Absolutely. Brazen. Oh, 60. Oh, I wish I was 60 again. To be 60 again. But yes, yes. I mean, people do say age is just a state of mind. And I think there is a lot in that. Um, Around my mum's art group, I think the average age there in the late 70s. Right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm sure one of the things I do like about YouTube is I'm sure it does partly keep me just hooked into IT a little bit more than I would be, and I think it does keep me young, just kind of connecting with a whole range of ages of people. Um, I just turned 60 a couple of weeks ago. Congratulations! Congrats! Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, art is a wonderful thing to take into, let's not say old age, into our I won't say later years either. That sounds a bit ominous, you know, into our mature period of life, you know. And sometimes we actually have more time to do it too, to explore it. So that's helpful. And drawing as opposed to painting is certainly very portable. Although I guess location. Watercolor's pretty portable too, but I just think back to my 6-foot painting, oil paintings. They weren't very portable. Yeah. Yeah. Do I have koalas around our place? Look, I've not seen any in the bushland that's closest to us, but they have been found about 15 minutes drive from here. It's the same bush, it's continuous, but we're just that much little bit closer to Sydney, where I am. Um, they're not huge around here because I mean, Sydney is a city of 6 million people, and there've been people around here for a long time who haven't particularly been friendly for koalas for most of that time. Um, I have seen them in the bush. I've seen them driving up towards Queensland. My sister lives up near the Queensland border, and I've seen them in trees driving to her place. I've seen them in trees driving on coastal roads around the Victorian coast, just out of Melbourne. Yeah. So, ever go take on a nature walk? Well, Scott, haven't you looked at yesterday's video yet? I do actually. It starts with a little walk through my local bush, that goes to the location of the trees that I drew. So I think you're giving away that you've fallen behind in watching my videos. And there's a little bit at the end that just goes past that place to another place. And I have got a few videos where I've put a few clips in of birds and things. I have a nice clip of a lyrebird, which are local to where we live. They're one of our more distinctive wildlife birds. We have so many birds. We have about a dozen different types of parrots that visit our backyard, and we've had we've had a couple of goannas in the yard, which is like the second largest lizard in the world. Lots of snakes, sadly, including the second most venomous snake in the world and the most venomous spider in the world, are in our backyard. But we don't worry about them too much. We have possums that descend all over the house and everything around the house every night. They thump up and down on the roof and eat anything we leave out. We've had echidnas, also known as the spiny anteaters. They're probably a bit like an Australian porcupine in size and appearance. On our 5-step, we've had little sugar glider. We've not had a kangaroo in the yard, but we had one hop up the street from the park. What else have we had in the yard? We've had like a brush turkey, which is like a very big chicken-like bird that's black with a yellow and red head. Sounds a bit bizarre, doesn't it? What else have we had? Oh, we have lots of blue-tongued lizards, which are large lizards that they look a bit like a snake can in the grass, just their colorings, which can give you a bit of a shock at times, given that some of the snakes in our yard can kill us. But they actually just eat snails and things, and they have a blue tongue, which is not surprising. In Australia, we like to call things what they are. We don't like to think too much, too hard. Walk and draw. Look, the problem, the problem with drawing and like video and drawing on site is just that technically it's very difficult to do without a camera crew. Even if you're if you've got someone doing it, then I guess that's the hassle. You've got to probably pay to have someone do it with you. You can't really set up cameras yourself in public locations that people will just walk past and walk off with your $300 camera stand, while you're busy looking at your drawing and don't realize the camera's gone. And then there's that, you could set it all up and it's not quite taking, when you sit down and draw, you move slightly and now you can't actually see what you're drawing. And then the whole time is wasted at the end because you don't discover that till you finish the drawing. So they're kind of the problems. Yeah, I mean, if it's sort of somewhere like in the bush, I suppose if you could find somewhere to put a camera and to attach it somehow so it's looking over your shoulder, maybe I could maybe put the camera in this and kind of attach it to a tree. tree branch behind me looking down. I don't know. But yeah, it's really just the technical issues of trying to have the camera. Yeah. Each bucket has about 30 types of colors. Oh, using kids colored pencils. 100 for €6. Yeah, well, that's a lot of pencils. Um, yeah, yeah. So, look, in the end, in terms of materials, I say use what you can afford to use and to use without thinking. I mean, at the beginning, I think of learning a skill, I don't know that the value in using expensive materials is necessarily worth it for the quality of the work and for what you're learning at the very start. As you improve, I think the difference between cheap materials and more expensive ones can start to make a difference. I would think, though, that with ink drawing, there's a point where the paper might make more of a difference than the pen. So going for a really expensive pen may be less perhaps advantageous than buying a better quality of paper. So yeah, but in the end, it's experimenting. And what I just got comfortable and realized I'm too far away to read the chat. If you get an action camera, e.g. GoPro, you can put it on your neck and it has a wide angle lens. Oh dear. Yes, drawing is certainly cheaper than oil paint, I tell you, where you can pay $100 for a tube of red this size. Kindly smash the like button. Oh, thank you, Brazen. How kind. Watercolor is bankruptcy. Yeah. Well, it depends on what colors you like to paint in. If you like to paint in lots of earth colors, it's not so bad. But if you like some of those pure, bright and colorful pigments, yes. For my trees, for my skies, I used to use one of my trees that's here. The paint, the color down the bottom is cerulean, and that's really expensive. And at the top, it's cobalt blue, and that's really expensive. So all these big skies used to cost a fortune. Whereas I could get any type of brown for a couple of bucks a tube at the best quality. So it does depend on what color you want. When you buy student quality paints, they're all synthetic pigments, so that's why all the colors are the same. But when you buy artist quality paints, whether it's watercolor or and that's how you can know if all the colors are the same, they're not artist quality paints, they're synthetic colors. If some colors are a lot more expensive, gobsmackingly more expensive than others, then they're artist quality and they're made from pigments. So each color is made from a different material, which is ground up into a powder and mixed in with whatever oils they use to create the paint. And some pigments, some of the substances that they grind up are obviously a lot more expensive than others. And earth type colors that are mostly found in the earth, well, they're pretty cheap, and some of them are more like precious gemstones. Well, again, yeah, it can depend, Dave, on the color and on the brand. Watercolor sticks, very cost effective, right? I've got some watercolor pencils that I bought somewhere years ago that I've never used. Yeah. Who knows the feeling of buying art supplies because they're cheap and not worrying about whether you've ever actually used that type of art material before, that medium before. What's happening with my hair here? Oh, at least I still have it. Yep. Okay. All righty. Well, unless someone has a thanks for joining in on that discussion. Please let people know, if you can, that if they don't speak English, that maybe my channel is more accessible to them at this point. I really should do something about that bed behind me before. I should put a nice painting on the wall there rather than just having it blank, shouldn't I? It's the one wall in the room where there's not a painting of mine hanging up. This is where all my paintings come to die, the ones that weren't sold. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I should fix that up, shouldn't I? At least make the cushions look fluffed. Mm. So yeah. So thanks everyone for joining. I think that's all. So unless someone wants to throw me a last minute question, I'll work out what I'll do today. And if you have any ideas for videos, please, I'm always happy to have comments. I read all the comments. I don't always get a chance to respond to them all because some days you can get no comments and other days you can get 15, 20, and some of them require a lot more thinking, even if not necessarily more words than others, or I'm trying to chase up a link, find a video on something, which can take a very long time now with so many videos. It's interesting for me because I can plot my drawing journey through my videos, just the things I said and the way I said them, and the drawings that I thought were good enough to have a video made with them, 3.5 years ago compared to what I'd be happy with now. So it's kind of like I've written an autobiography of my art journey with videos, which makes it interesting. Do I have any plans to visit the States? Can't remember here. Look, I have just been there for a short period of time, just on the West Coast. One of my daughters was there just last month for, I think, almost 3 weeks. It was just a quick trip, just for fun, just for her birthday, to celebrate it. LA briefly to do the Academy Awards thing, and then New York and Washington. So I think this weekend we're actually doing the slideshow, and she promised to take me photos of, particularly in Washington and New York, of things that I could use as reference photos. So you should be having a few more USA subjects to draw. I hope there'll be things there that I can use. So that would be good. I don't just use photos online that I find, because there are copyright rules, and I don't want to end up having a video that then I have to take down because there's a copyright dispute for who took the photo. And if you're not aware, it is a copyright infringement to do a drawing from a photo where you didn't take the photo without the photographer's permission. And so for all my Instagram drawings, where they're drawings of Paris street scenes that I've used photos of amazing Paris photographers, they've all given me permission to draw from their photos. Otherwise, it's an infringement. Now, if you're just finding photos online to draw just for your own pleasure and for learning, it obviously doesn't matter. But if you think one day you might want to sell prints of your drawing or exhibit them, then yeah, it legally is a copyright infringement if you don't have their permission. So Yep, it's a good idea, I think, Brazen. And it also means when we take the photos, we can actually take the photos that we want to draw. We can find the subjects that we like, and we can really work at those, and the angles and the lighting and all of those things. Okay, well, we'll call it a day here. Yes, in theory you could, but in practice, if they're really good quality photos, I couldn't have probably. There's also the camera and all of that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, look, thanks everyone. We'll call it a night here, or call it a day here for me, and I'll start to get on with my day. And whatever you're doing, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.